Well, we return this morning with another Championship Manager special as the summer merry-go-round is really in full swing now. We're of course this time talking about West Bromwich Albion, who late yesterday evening appointed Tottenham first team coach Ryan Mason as their new head coach ahead of the 25-26 season. After a short-term return with Tony Mowbray, who didn't last long in his second stint in charge, West Brom will be looking to get back on track and back with a push for the top six next year. We're going to talk a little bit about the old man, the last couple of seasons at the club, and where we think Ryan Mason needs to improve the team to take them further. But of course, if you're a West Brom fan, importantly, give us your thoughts in the comments below as well about this appointment. Do you wish there was a more experienced man coming in, or are you excited about a new era with a young head coach? Firstly, though, before we go and talk about the new man, let's reflect on the last year or two at West Brom, because obviously Tony Mowbray returned just after midway through the season last year, came back because Carlos Corberán was called by his boyhood club Valencia, where he's gone and done an excellent job as well. And we need to talk about that last season, because one of the things that we really saw with West Brom over the couple of seasons with Carlos Corberán was intense discipline. Something we saw from his Huddersfield side as well, a team that's very hard to beat, a team that works and is structured incredibly well, and is very, very difficult to break down, reflected in the fact that the last two seasons they conceded 47 goals each, just about a goal a game. However, when Tony Mowbray came back in charge, we did say here we thought it would be a good fit in the long term and that he would be able to get success at the club. I hold my hands up to that, and I still think that might have been the case. However, one of the things we did highlight is that Tony Mowbray's style was very different to Carlos Corberán. It's more aggressive, it's more dynamic, it relies a lot more on younger, quicker players, people who are going to be exciting on the counter-attack and play at speed. And West Brom had a bit more of a team that was disciplined, structured, and then could control possession in games if need be. So the immediate style was always going to be difficult. I don't think many of us expected West Brom to struggle quite as much as they did in terms of points and in terms of results. However, I think we all knew that there was going to be a little bit of an adaptation of style needed, and that perhaps wasn't going to be instant. So in a way, I do feel for Mowbray, but it was going to be a difficult time in the short term, and ultimately the results were probably still worse than expected, albeit that top half of the championship, bar the top 3 or 4 last year, was incredibly tight. So probably not surprised to see Tony Mowbray go given the results, but I was surprised to an extent that it was that quick. However, if we move on to a new dawn now, after a 29% win rate for Tony Mowbray, we move on to the 25-26 season with a lot of change on the pitch and Ryan Mason appointed off it. Let's have a quick look at a statement as Ryan Mason is appointed first team head coach. They're obviously delighted to confirm it. A 3-year deal at the Hawthorns, which is always a risk at championship level now, where the average lifespan of a manager is well under a season. And it's a little bit of a unique one with Ryan Mason because there's so many sort of oddities to him. As the statement mentions, was forced to retire early, has come back to Tottenham, been involved in several roles in the club, which is a great thing because you're able to see the benefit of promoting a youth player, the impact it can have. You're able to see the good side of it from the assistant manager's point of view. He's worked under some of the best managers in world football, some strict disciplinarians, the likes of Mourinho and Conte, whose teams and style and setup probably fall more into the Carlos Corberán style of things. And then you've had the out-and-out attack of Postecoglou, the balance of Pochettino, who he obviously played under for several years, played under Harry Redknapp as well, a completely different style where it's all about man management and motivation, was part of the coaching team under Nuno, who of course short-lived but has done a brilliant job at Forest, and again, a slightly smoother, calmer style of operation there. So it's a very interesting background that he's got. Now, one of the things we normally do when a manager is coming in is judge them based on their managerial record. And while over the last few years, we've seen a lot of managers come in who haven't got a great deal of championship experience. I think of Vincent Kompany, who had a few years at Anderlecht. We look even last summer at the likes of Thorup, for example, who had come from elsewhere. What we haven't seen for a long time is a manager with no managerial experience, albeit prior to being the Huddersfield manager, Carlos Corberán was largely in that position as well, who had just worked under great coaches as an assistant for the most part. So we've got a bit of a weird situation with Ryan Mason where we can't really judge his style of play, his teams. He's worked under such a different mix of managers that you don't know what the influence is going to be tactically. You don't know what's going to be the most prominent. he's only actually managed 13 senior games in his career and has got the unique stat of managing his first ever game in a major cup final against Pep Guardiola, which I don't think we're going to say many times in a Championship Manager special in the next few years. So he's done okay in those two spells. The first one he secured European football and the top seven, only lost the League Cup final narrowly. Second spell not quite so good, but that was after the Conte blowout and a team that was, well, I think on the ropes a little bit, to be fair, in terms of morale. There was, of course, an awful lot of talk by the board and the sporting director, Andrew Nesta, about the unique philosophy they want to implement and all that stuff nowadays. But the coaching abilities and his in-game tactics and the way that he would implement their model was something that was talked about a lot during the statement. What also intrigued me, and something I always criticise young managers for when it doesn't work out normally, is appointing a senior assistant manager, someone with experience. And of course, he's brought Nigel Gibbs in with him, someone who's got extensive experience as an assistant and as a coach. He's also obviously got James Morrison for that insight from the club, Boaz Myhill part of it as well. And he also brought the head of performance, formerly of Spurs and Rangers. So one of the things that I think he's done, and a trap he hasn't fallen into, is appointing experience alongside him. It's such an important thing. And generally, those who don't succeed in their first English job or as relatively inexperienced managers, they often don't bring experience with them. And that's normally a problem going forward. So he's definitely ticked that box, which is a really important thing. I think that's going to be helpful for him because, look, it's a fairly experienced West Brom squad, but there are going to be a number of players moving on this summer. We've already seen Semi Ajayi's going, John Swift, Grady Diangana, lots of appearances between them. Yes, maybe a couple didn't live up to their brilliant form early in their spells, where their first promotion with Diangana and Ajayi involved. John Swift maybe didn't have quite the impact that he did at his previous club, but he did okay. But there was a West Brom squad that had a lot of similar players there. Maybe need to go and focus on one or two signings, which we'll talk about in a moment. However, it's a lot of experience and a lot of appearances moving out of the club, which does suggest a shift towards a slightly different direction under Ryan Mason. And while we can't judge tactically what's going to go on, we can judge what West Brom need tactically. Because if we look over the last couple of seasons, obviously 2 years ago under Corberan, they got into the playoffs, finished fifth, but they were the lowest scorers in the top six of the division, albeit that's still more than everyone bar one scored last season because the Championship had far less goals in it. And in last season, away from home, really struggled for goals and really struggled for results. We talked about Corberan's solid base, but one of the few detriments of that spell was that away from home, they really struggled to win games. Last year, they picked up just 4 wins from 23 matches. Yes, drew half of their away games, but didn't really take the onus to go and win matches. And goal scoring was talked about as a problem. And obviously, it was a little bit different for a while because Josh Maja flew out of the traps last year. It scored bucket loads of goals early on. But when that faded away, there wasn't really a lot more in those West Brom ranks that were able to take them to the next level. And in the end, they finished with less than 60 goals last year, which of course, still more competitive across the division, but far less goals than they'd scored the year before. And that was a difference maker for them in not making the playoffs, having conceded exactly the same as the previous year. So that ability to go and win games, to get that match winner, to have those moments of magic in the team, and to have a regular goal scorer is something that has been missing at times. Of course, there are good players in those attacking lines, but you do feel that that out-and-out goal scorer at Championship level is something that's missing across a lot of clubs and so often is now. But you just feel that that's something they're going to have to focus on. Ryan Mason, of course, spent most of his career playing with or working with Harry Kane. He's someone who's definitely seen the value in having a top-class striker up front to put goals away and save your team. However, coming here off the back of winning the Europa League, confidence will be high. Yes, it's a different role. Yes, it's something new. It's very hard to call. But what does Ryan Mason need at West Brom? Well, certainly goals is something we've talked about. Certainly a natural striker. Certainly a little bit of pace into the team. It's something that Tony Mowbray struggled with in his stint. That there's a couple of very good young players there, but that out-and-out pace on the break, there's a lot of experience, there's a lot of people who are good on the ball, but is there that out-and-out breaking quality, that ruthless streak that maybe would help them win more games away from home? Because that is the other thing that Ryan Mason is going to need. He's going to need to pick up wins on the road. And if he can turn some of those draws into victories, keep that solid home record they've had over the last couple of years, then getting back into that top 6 is certainly a target for West Brom. You would imagine that is the expectation. Break into that top 6. You've got a side coming down who almost broke Derby's points record in Southampton, but they've gone for a young English coach as well. You've got Leicester coming down, who are in a bit of disarray at the minute. Charges off the pitch, uncertainty in the manager situations, their main goal scorer leaving the club, and obviously a little past his prime. Ipswich coming down, are they going to do a Luton or are they going to bounce straight back? It's so impossible to tell. And then a number of other clubs who had similar finishes to West Brom last year, or in a similar position, who have gone for manager changes as well. Watford have gone for someone completely unknown for the Championship. Norwich City look like they're going to go for an experienced Championship manager, but that will leave Bristol City needing a new manager if that comes off in the next couple of days. There's going to be a lot of uncertainty among those clubs in a Championship, and West Brom have taken a gamble, of course, by going for someone who's got next to no managerial experience, albeit has managed a cup final at Wembley and a few other massive games at the top end of the Premier League. So it's probably one of the hardest ones to call because you're not coming in with a manager who's just new to England, but new to management generally. I'm really intrigued to see how Ryan Mason gets on. Obviously, from a British point of view, it would be great to see a young English coach come in and do well. I'm more probably interested to see what style is influencing him the most because he's worked under managers that play in every single way. And I'm really intrigued to see which one comes out with West Brom, with a side that obviously was successful under Corberan, but he's going to want to build to becoming a more aggressive team. Are they going to bring in a couple of young players on loan from Spurs, give them Championship experience as they bolster their squad next year, having got to the Champions League with that Europa League win? So a curious managerial appointment, but we've got to finish with the two questions that we normally ask. Will the manager see out their spell? And how do we think West Brom will get on next season? Well, will the manager see out a 3-year contract? Almost certainly no. If he does brilliantly, he's probably going to get poached. If not, and he doesn't get into that top 6 next year, you would expect him to be sacked. The average manager lifespan in a Championship tells us that. But whether it'll be a success is a far more debatable question because we just don't know enough about him. There's a lot of talk about a progressive style, about the project and the model and all those long-term words that always get mentioned at a football club. I do like that he surrounded himself with experience off the pitch as well as having some players left on it. I think there needs to be signings in the summer. There's got to be another out-and-out goal scorer. You can't rely on Daryl DK to stay fit, who is one of my favourite Championship strikers. When he was at his best at Barnsley, he was literally unplayable. But how much has the injuries taken out of him? Is he going to be able to stay fit? I don't think you can rely on that. So I think an out-and-out number 9 is a requirement. We're likely to see a bit more investment from West Brom given the off-the-pitch situation this summer and whether they can add some pace into that attacking ranks. If they can just add one solid defender to it as well, I think they've got a chance and a pretty solid team that can compete again for that top 6 next year. But whether or not they can make it, I think it's going to be tight. I think we're going to see something similar next season. It looks like there's a potential for 3 or 4 runaway teams. Whether West Brom can be one of those, I don't know. It's going to rely on a good start and a very good transfer window. Always the problem with doing these in early June. But I do think they're going to be in that battle for the top 6. I do think it's going to be very tight again. I think whether or not they make it depends partly on how Mason adapts his style. Will he go all-out attack like the Postecoglou style, which just doesn't often work in a Championship? Will he find a mix or will he fall back into that defensive pattern, which could also work against them if they're struggling to win away from home again? And also whether they can add the right players to the squad. And if they can do that, I think West Brom could potentially be in the playoffs next year. I don't know whether Mason's going to be a success, but I do think he's going to be battling for what I expect West Brom to achieve, which is to be in that battle for the top 6 and probably sneak in. And I think he's going to be in that mix. But whether or not he keeps his job will probably depend on whether he makes it or not. Either way, a very interesting appointment. West Brom fans, what do you make of it? Let us know down in the comments below. Other Championship fans, are you intrigued by this? Because obviously Ryan Mason has been linked with loads of jobs over recent seasons. This is the one he's chosen. A club that quite often does give stability if you take the last Mowbray stint aside. Do you think he's going to be given the time to implement his style, to learn to make his mistakes, which he will do early on, and to push West Brom towards the top 6? Are you confident, Baggies? Let us know in the comments. If you did enjoy this little review of Ryan Mason becoming West Brom head coach, then please do chuck a thumbs up on it. We got plenty more manager specials coming over the summer, so do subscribe and turn that notification bell on. And then, of course, next season, it will be Championship predictions again every single match week, as well as our pre-season predictions in late July. No Luton Town this time, so you've got a chance to gain the results on me. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you again soon with Norwich up for grabs, with Hull City waiting for an appointment as well. There's going to be plenty more manager specials to come this summer, and we'll be here to review all of them.